Are you ready?
Let's go.
Now circling in the neutral zone.
Here's the pitch on the way. 36 yards for the win.
This.
Here comes a big chance. The shot.
Is
this the dagger?
The neutral zone.
This is as good as it gets.
The Neutral Zone is brought to you by the Ontario Para Network. Follow them online at onpara.ca.
Now, here's your host, two-time Paralympian, Brock Richardson.
What's going on? It's time for another edition of The Neutral Zone. I am indeed your host, Brock Richardson. Coming up on today's show, we have the privilege of speaking with Ontario Para's Executive Director Doug Hannum and Nina, all surrounding the conversation of their mascot called Felix. And we will talk a little bit about what Felix means to the organization moving forward and beyond. Plus, we're going to have a discussion on the importance of funding, particularly in parasports. I'm joined by Josh Watson. Here come your headlines.
Neutral Zone headlines.
Ontario Para Network is actively seeking enthusiastic community members to join our organizing committee. If you have experience in hospitality, sponsorship, or marketing, we would love to hear from you. Your skills and insights could play a pivotal role in shaping our events and initiatives, helping us create meaningful experiences for everyone involved. If you're interested in learning more about this opportunity and how you can contribute, please reach out to Tammy at onpara.ca. We look forward to connecting with you. CBC's senior reporter and very good friend of this program, Devin Haru, is set to receive the King Charles III Coronation Medal for his top quality, enthusiastic, and empathetic sports coverage. Devin is an absolute champion of both the Olympics and Paralympics, and we at the Neutral Zone could not be more happy or proud of Devin for his hard work. This is a very well-deserved honor, and congratulations, Devin. Devin will join us on next week's episode, so don't miss it.
The WNBA has announced that they will be going to Portland for 2026. There are currently 12 WNBA teams. This will make 13. This is always good to see the growth in women's sports, particularly in the WNBA. The more women's sports, the more understanding we will have of women's sports and appreciation for the grand athleticism that they bring us. So we congratulate the WNBA on bringing more exposure to its games, and hopefully this will bring more exposure to women's sports, as I mentioned. Those are your headlines for this week. If you want to get a hold of us on social media, here's how you can do that.
And welcome back to the Neutral Zone broadcast booth.
Play ball!
We're set to get this bowl game underway. The first pitch is brought to you by Brock Richardson's X account at Neutral Zone BR. First pitch and a strike. Hey gang, why not strike up a chat with Claire Buchanan from the Neutral Zone? Find her on X at Neutral Zone CB. There's a swing of the chopper out to second base, right at Claire as she picks up the ball, throws it over to the first base for a routine play.
Out!
And fans, there's nothing routine about connecting with Cam and Josh from the Neutral Zone at Neutral Zone Cam J and at J Watson 200. And the Neutral Zone is brought to you by the Ontario Para Network. Connect with them at ON Para Network. Follow them online at onpara.ca. Now that's a winning combination.
We are pleased to be joined by Executive Director of Ontario Para Network and Doug Hannum. And we are also pleased to be joined by graphic designer and creator of Flex, Nina. It's a pleasure to have both of you on the program. Nice to be joined by both of you.
Thanks for the invite again, guys. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, we enjoy talking to you. Let's start off with Doug, if we can. Doug, can you start by talking to us about why it was important to create Flex, the mascot?
Absolutely. So we really felt like, it came up in a staff meeting maybe a year ago, where we felt like we needed something that would be greater representation of who we are, greater representation of the organization that we are, but even more importantly, a greater representation of our athletes. Photos are great. And if you go to our website and if you're on our social media, I think we're pretty good that way about posting a bunch of photos of our athletes in action. And of course, that will never change. But we felt like a mascot might have just a little bit cachet. We're all sports lovers here today, and we follow different teams. And who doesn't know their favorite mascot? Who doesn't resonate with the mascot? It's a big thing in sport, and it just adds that much more. And I think for us, it's just that much more captivating. So we felt like the mascot would be a good representation of our athletes, of para-athletics, and just as an organization and being inclusive.
Doug, if we could stick with you just for this next question, and then we'll bring in Nina into this conversation. But can you shed some light on you did a little bit there about how long it takes for an organization to come up with the idea of a mascot and then put it into plan and then ultimately decide this is when we're going to debut it. Can you talk a little bit about just the overall planning?
Yeah, and it may be longer depending on the scope of the organization. Of course, we're not like a professional sports team where there's a whole lot of branding involved and probably a consumer opinion and that kind of thing. But we did elicit that. So I would say it probably took us a good year from the moment that it first came up in the staff meeting to when we started to bring it to life. And the biggest bonus of all was we knew Nina from meeting her before at a couple of the events. We knew about her background. And the moment we came up with the idea, we thought, who better to come up with a mascot for our organization than an existing athlete, somebody that's been involved in the sport and understands the challenges. And it just so happened that Nina was in our midst and has done some terrific work before. So that process began in terms of working with her and giving her some ideas and feedback in terms of what the mascot might look like. We narrowed it down to 2 animals. We decided that an animal would be the best representation. I think it's fairly common in sport to have animals, but we did want to be unique. And I'm sure there are other franchises that have a fox, but then we put it out to the community. And I think we also had a bear. Yeah, because we talked about bear in a chair, right, Nina? Which was kind of kitschy, but there's lots of bears out there too. So yeah, our membership chose the fox. And then Nina set to work about creating different versions of Flex. They weren't Flex at the time, but of the fox, to represent, again, tennis, basketball, and rugby. And we got those taken care of. And then finally, and not insignificant, was the name. And so we put that out to our membership as well. There were a number of interesting ones, but Flex, again, seemed to work really well. There's a bit of a sports connotation there. Joss was flexing his pipes before we got started here. So we get that, right? So we get that Flex part, and it just Flex the fox rolls off your tongue. So that all of that took a good, I'd say, 6 to 8 months at least. And then, as you know, Flex made their debut a few weeks ago at our launch party and our Paralympic party. The one thing I will say about Flex too, and we're really careful, and I think it's representative of this day and age, is Flex has no gender. Flex is not male, female, or otherwise. We just refer to Flex as Flex. And we had many discussions about that, and we felt like that was the appropriate thing to do. Like probably all the mascots that are out there, I don't know that if we go with a physical version that Flex will ever speak. And part of the reason that is because we don't want the person inside to be identified as with gender as far as Flex is. So there you go. relatively brief overview of how Flex came to life.
Now, Nina, you are the graphic designer and you were the one that was tasked with creating Flex. Can you tell us a little bit about your process and let us in on a little bit of the thought behind how you came up with Flex?
Sure. So I had actually been playing with the Forest City Flyers in London on their basketball team, and we were at an event, and I had met Tammy there, and we got started talking about, oh, nice to meet you, where are you from, etc. I mentioned that I had a design background, and so she said, okay, hey, well, we were thinking about maybe doing a mascot. Do you think you could give me your contact information? So that was kind of the start, and I thought, oh, okay, cool, a mascot, interesting. And we had some emails back and forth kind of about, okay, well, if we kind of want to get you started on this, go ahead, like, shoot some ideas, whatever, we can do a back and forth. And so actually the whole bear in the chair thing came from I was at a bunch of tournaments in the new year, the last year, while I was working on Flex, and I had asked other Ontario athletes, hey, if you could have an animal native to Ontario as a mascot for Onpera, what would you pick? And there were a couple different responses, but the most common answer was bear in a chair. So I thought, okay, sure, I'll do a bear, but Doug had wanted to put it to a vote, so I needed to make another one. And I thought that the fox was kind of a flashy character design. It's lots of people use foxes to be like really crafty kind of characters, and I thought that was interesting. So even though not many people, I don't think anyone suggested a fox to me, I threw it in there with the bear, and people ended up liking that one more. So that was kind of the process there.
Doug, you kind of mentioned it earlier a little bit about the membership vote. When you think back on this, why is it important for a parasport organization specifically to be involved and their membership to be involved in a vote such as this one?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, look, we're all about inclusivity, and we're all about making sure that everybody is involved. And, I think, guys, that I did a little bit of research. I could be wrong. I could be proven wrong, but I have yet to find a para mascot anywhere. We could be the first. And if that's the case, we'll have to figure that one out, because that's not insignificant. That I did a little Google search, nothing really seemed to come up, but not to get off track too much. But yeah, I think connecting with the membership we're always very conscious of as an organization. I think provincial sports organizations as a whole have to, but I think in our case, I always view our membership and our athletes as special. And as such, I think they deserve special consideration, because they're not your average athlete. They're not your average participant. And so, in my case, I have cerebral palsy, so I can relate from a disability perspective, but I've never been in a wheelchair. And so who am I to make decisions when I've never actually been in that wheelchair and don't have that perspective? And I go back again, the fact that Nina has that lived experience and is so talented. And let's not forget about that. She is very talented. Everybody is just so impressed with Flex, just how Flex looks. It's just the tail. Every little detail of Flex just works so well. So yeah, that's always an important part of what we do, and will always continue to be a part of what we do. And, in order for Flex to resonate, we definitely needed the input of our members.
Now, you mentioned, Doug, that you had a watch party for the Paralympic Games on September 7th. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there. I was getting married, but I do have a two-part question.
Congratulations.
Congrats, by the way.
I do have a two-part question for you. First of all, was the event a success? And secondly, why was it important for you to debut Flex at such an event?
Yeah, another really good question. Yeah, I mean, Nina was there. Do you think it was a success, Nina? Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, it was really fun. Well, no, I think it was good. There was a good turnout of people, and the people who were there were all super nice and supportive. It was kind of a surprise for a lot of people that the mascot reveal was happening, that part of it, but they really enjoyed that, and they're like, "Oh, what's going on here? This is so exciting." So that was fun. It was kind of like a Flex's birthday party situation.
Anyway, yeah, no, you're right. I think, it wasn't about filling the room with 150 people and, grandiose and that kind of thing. What I really liked about it is that we had former Paralympians there, and we had other athletes there. And we just had some general public people show up to participate. Some of the kids who were at Variety Village came along and tried sit volleyball. So we did some para sports just to give everybody a thing to do. And of course, the focus of attention was first on the Paralympics. And it just made sense that was the place for Flex to officially start. So we were very lucky to have CBC come along and interviewed both Nina and I, which was a really nice day. Did you get to see the clip, Nina?
No, I didn't. I couldn't find it.
Oh, geez. You know what? I'll hunt it down for you. I hope it's still out there, but I did send it along, so I'll make a note to send you the clip. But anyway, CBC was there. They sent a camera person, and they interviewed us, and we gave out the popsicle sticks, as I call them, with Flex on them.
Oh, yes. I have one.
And so, yeah, it just made perfect sense to debut Flex. Now, our Paralympians, just a quick aside, guys, our Paralympians had a little bit of an edge. But our Paralympians, what we did for them, and we've never done this before, it went over really well. So all of the Ontario members of the wheelchair basketball teams and the wheelchair rugby team actually got a care package before they left for Paris. And in that care package were two Flexes. And we heard in particular from the women, they just loved Flex and they loved the care package. We put two in there because we thought, at Paralympics and Olympic Games, a lot of the athletes like to trade stuff. So I asked a couple of the athletes, did you trade Flex? And they said, no, we didn't want to give Flex up. We like Flex too much. So yeah, it was very cool. That went over really well. I wish we had seen Flex on camera at the Paralympics, but it's all good.
Nina, can you talk a little bit for us? Because putting this all together is one thing, and it's a task in and of itself. But when you put it all together and you see it at the watch party, what's that feeling like for you when you developed it? You put it all together with the help of others, of course, but you're the backbone of the whole thing. What's the feeling like when you see it unveiled and Flex gets unveiled?
Honestly, that it was kind of a surreal feeling. I don't think I can say that my art has been used in such an interesting and important way before. So it was really cool to have everyone there and all the banners, and they pulled the curtains off them, and there was Flex, and it was really cool to see that and to see, oh, it turned out so well, and we're going to be able to use these for events in the future. And I think it's really cool that, and I'm really new to the parasport community in general as well. I only started playing 2 years ago, and the community has just been so welcoming and so kind to me that it just feels like I'm very happy to have been able to give back in such a meaningful way, and to probably continue to do that and see where we go with Flex, end of the Paralympics, start of Flex, see what happens there. And all the other athletes, people I've met before, seen before, talked to, played with, they've said, oh my God, I didn't know that you were an illustrator. Like, that's so cool. Wow, love the mascot and stuff like that. And it feels really cool to be able to contribute in that way.
And we have affectionately referred to Nina as Flex's mother.
There we go.
Oh, yes. Flex's mom.
Hey, everybody needs a mom, so that's
right,
awesome.
I guess.
Yeah. Doug, what is the goal of developing a mascot like Flex? And in particular, I'm sure there are short-term and also maybe long-term goals. Wonder if you can talk to us about that.
Definitely, yeah. So Flex will live in the digital world for the first little bit. So Flex will start to become more prevalent on our social media and website, and we'll continue to get Flex out there. Particularly if we have any announcements or anything new that we're doing, we'll probably get Flex to make those announcements. The banners that Nina referred to, so we got some really cool banners. I'm sure you've all seen them before. They pop up, and of course we have one per sport, and then we're calling that the other one a hero pose, where Flex is standing. All of the other flexes are Flex in a wheelchair, and so we're starting to use those banners already. In fact, Claire is going to a rugby event tomorrow, and Flex is going to that rugby event. The banner is going. So it hasn't taken long for Flex to start to make an appearance. Little secret, I'm hoping that by next spring, we may have Flex, the actual mascot, ready to go. Because we are hosting the 2025 Women's and Men's National Championships. And so for me, that would be an ideal time for Flex the mascot to come to life. So we're going to look at that. I'll tell you guys that it's not cheap because let's face it, every mascot is custom. And we'll see if we can Flex can be adaptable for all the sports. But I'd really like to have an actual mascot. That would be the icing on the cake. And again, in terms of why and in terms of the messaging, I mean, the more that Flex is out there representing our athletes, representing inclusivity and parasport, the better. It's just another great vehicle for us to continue to deliver that message.
You know, I'm gonna say this, and it's not because you guys are the sponsor of this podcast. It's my true feeling. My true feeling is that I love the fact that Flex doesn't identify as any gender. I think we are so in a day and age now where that doesn't need to be, and no matter what you do, whether you said male, female, whatever the case is, you're going to alienate some population. Even if we just left it to male, female, somebody's going to say, well, what about me? And so to just generalize it and say, here's Flex the Fox, and they do not identify, that's good. And I think that is a smart decision on the part of Onpera, and I think it's going to resonate with people because of that, because Flex is going to be able to identify with everybody, and even people who aren't in chairs and aren't in sports. People are going to talk about, oh, there's Flex the Fox, and that's it. So I really like that, and I think that's where I'm just going to give the kudos for the decision made there.
Thank you. Yeah, it was very strategic. It's the type of thing that you do have to give some careful consideration to. We're lucky to have a really great staff team. Of course, Claire, and we also have a contractor that works with us who worked with CBC for a number of years. Actually was involved in Hockey Night in Canada. And we went to her for some input on this as well. We felt like somebody who is a professional and who had been involved in that kind of thing. And she agreed that a non-identified Flex was definitely the way to go. So I appreciate that. Yeah, we were very careful about that.
It was important that the design was able to reflect, like anybody could relate, even if you see Flex and you go, okay, I don't have Flex's specific disability, you can relate to the fact that Flex has a disability and plays sports and is just Flex, and they can relate to anybody. And that was really important to me, and I really hope that came across well. in the design.
It did from my perspective.
An outsider perspective, yeah, you can see that it did, and I think, it's important to just recognize that Flex has to be identified to a population that's everybody, and I think that's well done here, and kudos to everybody that put it together. Doug, before we end this interview, you kind of mentioned it. Any events that you'd like to promote?
No, I mean, we are going to definitely start promoting the 2025 national championships. That's a big deal for us. It's out at Durham College in May of 2025. We'll have a minimum of 5 female teams, a minimum of 5 male teams at the event. So it's a big chance. We haven't hosted an event in Ontario for many, many years. And Sport Durham, our partner in the event, is fantastic. They're totally engaged. They hosted the last Parasport Games, Ontario Parasport Games. So they've got a lot of experience, a great volunteer crew out there. So we're definitely working for that. And registration for the season starts in less than about a week tomorrow. So we're starting to gear up, get ready for another busy season of basketball and rugby.
I will just put it out there and say that I'm sure the Neutral Zone would love to do an on-location podcast there that day.
Absolutely. Let's get that in the calendar. Yeah, that would be great for you guys to be out there. You could do several shows.
Several.
Lots to talk about there.
Yeah, we know we're gonna have national team players there, up and comers. It's gonna be a fantastic event. We're really excited about it.
There you go. Mark it on your calendars. 2025. We'll be there, and we'll be promoting the content as we often do. Guys, thank you so much for doing this interview. We greatly appreciate it, and so great to see Flex be debuted and go over well. So thank you both for being involved.
Yeah, thank you for having us. This was a great interview.
Thanks, guys. Great job as always.
The Neutral Zone is sponsored by the Ontario Para Network. Their focus on the growth and development of wheelchair basketball, tennis, and rugby in Ontario.
It's always a pleasure to have Doug on, who is the executive director of Ontario Para, and it's important to have Doug on and anybody that's connected with Onpara, because after all, they do support our podcast, and so because of that, it's important to shine a light on things that they do. And we often, as you see, will post things in our headlines so that we can get information out there. But today particularly was a conversation that I was fascinated by, and that is the conversation of Onpara unveiling and creating a mascot, Flex, who is a fox, as we articulated in the previous segment. Josh, just overall, what would you say your thoughts were on the interview with Nina and Doug?
I really enjoyed the interview. We always have a good conversation when Doug comes on, so that is very nice to see him again and to get to catch up. And Nina seems lovely. I'm glad to see that she was able to not only use her graphic design background, but that she's also an athlete with the organization. I think that's very, very good, because it's always nice to use someone from the community when you're creating something for the community. So I was very intrigued by that. I hope that they continue to use Nina for other graphic design work, because I think she's very talented. As for the idea of having the mascot and it being a fox itself, I think that's a very interesting idea. They did mention that there was an option for a bear as well, which I don't know would have gone as well. I think the idea of a fox is interesting and kind of appealing. The piece that caught my ear was the non-binary nature of Flex, and as we talked about in the interview, I think that is actually a very good idea as well, because then you don't run the risk of alienating any part of the community. Because I think parasports and para athletes tend to be a microcosm of the population in general. And I think what we're seeing more and more are that people don't necessarily subscribe to the old binaries that existed in male and female. So for Flex to be that non-binary fox is quite interesting.
Yeah, I think also, just to piggyback on what you're saying, I think for the purposes of what Flex will be and will stand for and will be used for, I don't know that it's necessary to put a gender on Flex. I think the purpose is to put more eyeballs on the organization, to get more people talking about the organization. And I think, and this is to my point that I made during the interview, even if we just simply gendered him male or female, and I'm not saying this point to alienate anybody else, I'm just making it a very simple point. Even if we just took it as male or female, you're still alienating the other sex that you did not choose.
Exactly.
So you're alienating no matter how you slice this, and I think that is a real key point to all of this that's important, that makes a big difference, because as you point out, and I think this is where you were kind of going here, we already feel in the disability community that we don't belong, or we belong in a different space than everybody else. And so if you were to put that in the mascot, which is meant in a fun, artistic way, then you're alienating your own community more than they need to be. So again, kudos to Doug, to Nina, all of the people that made the decision to go with that. I think it's a real plus on the organization side of things. And I did not know, Josh, I could have figured it out, but I did not know that mascot suits actually cost a lot of money. And so that's why we haven't seen that yet, because it costs a lot of money, and for a not-for-profit organization, money comes, at a premium. And so I think that that's a decision as well that needed to be made, and I think they made the right decision with the banners versus the actual mascot for the time being.
And I think that is possibly a fundraising opportunity. It's also an opportunity, if anyone out there is listening who does costume design, perhaps they can donate a costume for Flex. That would be quite a nice idea as well. You never know who listens to a podcast or who knows who. If there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that our lives are like a giant spider web, and people are connected to us that we never would have thought. So I think that is very interesting. And just going back to our point about the non-binary aspect of Flex, I think what we see in the disability community is not only that we are separated or feel separated, but I think that we also see more of the community tends to lean towards that LGBTQ2S plus sort of community. And so for Flex to be non-binary, I think is a very good thing, as we were saying.
Yeah, I agree. And if you want to reach out to On Para, there's tags all over our podcast, beginning, middle, and everywhere. So
everywhere we can put them.
If you're just tuning into the show right now, it won't take long for you to figure out how to reach out to On Para, and that's why we love them. They are a one and only sponsor at this moment in time, so they're all over our podcast, and rightfully so. To piggyback on the conversation of funding, Doug and I had a conversation leading up to talking about Flex about talking about fundraising and funding in sports is always essential to make everything run smooth and just tick nicely. But this is especially important in para sports. When you think of the word fundraising, what does that mean in relation to sports in your mind?
For me, the fundraising that I think of when I think of fundraising for parasports is community engagement. So it's using your connections through your school, through your work, through your friends, through your neighbors to try to reach out to companies that can then in turn sponsor jerseys or sponsor ice time or sponsor a bus for travel to road games. And it's just about sort of helping find ways to get the day-to-day things done, whether it's again paying for the ice time, paying for the court time, paying for the jerseys, paying for the other specialized equipment. That's where my brain goes when I think fundraising.
To me, when I think of fundraising as the key to a door that opens a world to people that do not know that exists. And what I mean by that is fundraising can be used in all sorts of ways. It can be used in advertisements. It can be used in funding, as you mentioned. It can be used to achieve, buying piece of equipment for somebody who's unable to afford it. Funding really comes down to that, opening that door to that person that doesn't know para sports exists. And I mean, the obvious thing is, it funds tournaments, it funds trips, as you well point out. But to me, if we look at it more broadly, it also just grants access to para sports in general, if we're looking at the lens of para sports. And that's why for me funding is so very important, because without funding, other than word of mouth, the word isn't getting around as much unless you see things. If you're looking at a pamphlet and you say, oh, there's on para, funding for 2025 national championships, for an example, those kind of things. Without funding, the fire really doesn't get started, Josh.
If the money is not there to create the program, then the program doesn't exist.
Absolutely. Within that, though, in my mind, it seems more difficult to obtain funding for parasports. Why do you think that?
I think it's the exposure. Once, I mean, we talk about it. It seems like every show. If you expose people to parasport, people are interested. People want to get involved. People want to see it. But if you don't expose them to it, then they don't know it exists. It's a niche, if you will. And a lot of companies, a lot of advertisers just don't realize that that parasport enthusiasts, parasport fans, parasport athletes are a market, and you should market to them. And the best way to market to them is to get involved in what they're involved in, just like you do with any other market. But if they don't know it exists, they can't get involved in it.
Yeah, and I mean, I also would say to you that I think that people funding parasports look at it as a not viable investment of their money, which I shake my...
They look at it like charity.
Yeah, I shake my head at. Because, that's just not true. It is viable. It gives people the ability to go out and do things, to train, to get to the world championships, national team, para event that's grassroots or whatever. It gets that ability for them to access sports, to participate in sports, to give people a purpose in sports. And that's a big thing, because people in the disability community starve and want nothing more than a purpose to say, I'm getting up every day, I'm doing something, and I'm doing something that makes me feel good, makes me look good, might help me work out, depending on what you're doing exactly, what have you. And I think that's a really big deal as well.
For sure. Absolutely. All we want is the opportunity to do what we enjoy, just like everyone else. We want to be like everyone else. And I don't think that can be stressed enough, because as we talked earlier, we can end up being ostracized as a community because people don't know what to do with us. They see us at times as more of a problem than a community, if you will. It's all about, oh, those people will, they want me to spend money on a ramp and an elevator and this and that, and I can't afford it and what have you. When really all we're saying is give us the opportunity to partake in what you're doing. Like, okay, you've got a community center, give us a chance to use it. You've got a hockey program, give us access to it. That's all we want, is just to have the same opportunities as everyone else.
I think of the philanthropist who funded all of the Paralympic medals, or the vast majority of them, Sanjay Malaviya, and that was purely based on him looking at the situation and going, how are the Olympics being funded but not the Paralympics? And it does take someone like that to just be simply exposed to an organization and go, this is wrong, this is not what I want to see. Now, are you going to find hundreds of those people? No, I don't think you are. I think, this is why it's so difficult. But I will also say that I also believe that people feel like we're a liability. We're an inspiration of like, oh, look at, Josh won his little hockey tournament and he won the league. And it's just like, oh my God, like I can't handle that. It's not about that. Or like we get related to things that we're not connected to. And I'm not taking away from this organization whatsoever, but we constantly,
I know where you're going.
We constantly get related to the Special Olympics, and it's like we're not part of the Special Olympics. And anybody that's part of the Special Olympics, I'm not saying that what you do is bad, or we're just not the same organization. And we need to work together. One of my good friends, who's almost like a brother to me, does a lot of great work for the Special Olympics, which he's brought me to part of as well. What the Special Olympics does is great work, but we get so lumped in, as does the rest of the disability community, to all of the same box, and it's not fair to them. It's not fair to us. It's not fair to anyone, because if somebody goes up to somebody from the Special Olympics and says, oh, are you competing at the Paralympic Games? Well, the answer to that is no, because it's not the same event. So it works both ways, and it gets me really, really sad by just the connection and the understanding that one isn't the same, and it's not. That's like saying, two dances are the same, ballroom and ballet. They're not the same. Yes, they're dance, but they're not the same techniques.
They're sisters, but they're not the same.
No, 100% not. And that's,
it's really something. And I mean, having said that, it has come a way. I don't know if it's come a long way, but it has come a way. And I say that because I can remember in high school, the option for me, if I wanted to participate in track and field, was track. They had no concept of a person in a wheelchair being able to throw. And not only that, but they had one race, and it was the 1,500 meters. For those that don't know, that's 3 3/4 laps of a high school track. So I wanted to be involved, and so I did 1,500 meters in high school. Most of those races, up until I got to OFSA, which is the Ontario Provincial Championship, I was on my own. I was against myself and maybe one other person. And that other person happened to be a gentleman who was big in the track and field community for a long time. And he was a thalidomide baby, I believe. But he had no arms and pulled himself with his feet. And so here I am in a racing wheelchair, and here he is in a day chair pulling with his feet. And we're racing against each other, 1,500 meters. It was the most ridiculous sideshow you've ever seen. But at least we were included. And then when we got to OFSA and some of those levels just below, that's when you started to see more disabled athletes. But again, we might all be in chairs, but we weren't all in the same kind of chair. And so you had the same sort of thing. At least now it's getting to a point where they're starting to understand the idea of classifications, and not everyone can race in the same race and things like that. But it's taken a long time. It's taken 24 years.
And even chairs are very different. You can do so much different now with race chairs, with throw chairs, with whatever kind of wheelchair basketball chairs. You can do so much different now than what you could before. So to say to somebody, here's a manual chair and go race 1,500 meters isn't possible. Well, it's possible, but because of the technology now, it's like the sport's grown beyond just the ability to say, here's a wheelchair, go race in it. And it doesn't work that way. And I've said this story before, I believe, on the podcast, but I'll just briefly say it again. I had a friend who had a power wheelchair, and she was all excited to make this debut of her new power wheelchair, and it was all fitted for bocce, and she was really excited and couldn't wait. And we got to Portugal, and her chair had fallen off the conveyor belt. Well, then it was in pieces, and they handed her the chair in pieces, and they said, we're sorry, but don't worry, we'll give you the equivalent of a hospital chair to go and play world championships in. And I remember the look on her face being like, you want me to compete in that from a different country? Is there anything else they could have done? No. But to say, here's a wheelchair and go do it, we're beyond that level now, Josh.
You say, what else could they have done? They could have not broken the chair in the first place.
Yeah.
Handle the thing with the care it deserves. Honestly, like, that's the thing that drives me crazy, is that I see every day stories about people whose chairs don't get brought to the gate like they should, people whose chairs get broken, people who travel for sport and their equipment, their specialized chair is damaged. Like, there's no excuse for this. You wouldn't break someone's crystal vase that they're shipping. Why would you break a wheelchair? Because you don't think it's as important. Well, guess what? It is.
A couple things here to just bullet points here. Why should somebody, in your mind, fund parasport?
Because you are helping with quality of life above everything else. I mean, yes, you're giving a Paralympian a chance to compete and those things, but at a very base level, you should you should support, because then a person who doesn't see an outlet to live healthy has one.
Yeah, I couldn't say it any better. I mean, I look at, I go swimming once a week on average, and there's only one pool that I can do that on. And so I wish that there was some ability to fund other pools to make it more accessible, so that I wasn't limited to one pool in one situation. Because if things go wrong, and I won't go into grave detail, but if things go wrong, the week of my visit, and the day, that's it. There's no more visit. If there's something wrong with the water, if someone has some kind of accident or what have you, there's just no other option. And I look around and I think the able-bodied community has so many more options to go to whatever pool they want to. And unfortunately now where we are at a point now where we have lifts and pools mainly, but that doesn't work for everybody. So we have to caution ourselves in that when we say something is accessible for everybody, is it accessible for everybody? Because can I transfer like Josh can transfer? No, I cannot. And so what might be accessible for Josh or for me isn't one and the same. And so for me, I agree with you. I think I'll also say that you're giving somebody a purpose. You're doing something that hopefully makes you feel good inside. You're seeing the payoff. And that's the thing. I want to also say before we wrap on this conversation, I want to also say there is a reward to what you do, and it goes beyond a tax receipt, because I hear that all too often of, oh, if you support this, we'll give you a tax receipt. That's only an incentive to get someone to contribute. The payoff is go to these events if you're able to and see the quality of life that you're giving somebody, see that moment you're giving somebody. The Paralympic watch party that the Ontario Para Network did, I know it was well attended because I've seen pictures, and I know that it was done properly. And if you supported that, go and watch what's being done, because those parties aren't being done just for the community. They're being done for the greater good of the organization itself. You often hear things like we should fund the Paralympic sports, which I don't disagree with. And I think it's important as well, because that's obviously the end goal of where people are hoping to get to. But grassroots sports is where it starts, begins, all of that. For you, why do you feel it's important to fund grassroots sports as well as Paralympic sports?
It's important because the grassroots are where you're going to foster the love of the game. It's where someone's going to fall in love with para hockey. It's where someone's going to fall in love with para athletics, with wheelchair basketball, with wheelchair fencing, with para swimming. That is where you foster that love. And without grassroots involvement and without grassroots opportunity, you don't have a Paralympic movement.
Would you think of a time when you were younger where the grassroots really paid off for you?
You took that in a way I was not prepared to go. Yes, I would say there was, because I got exposed to parasports through teams like the London Flyers, Wheelchair Basketball Club. They also introduced me to wheelchair rugby. It turns out that I'm a para, so I don't necessarily qualify as a rugby player, but I was at least exposed to it on a recreational level. I got to try it. Decided it was too dangerous for me, but at least I tried it. Here in Mississauga, when I moved here in the late 90s, I ended up finding out through a friend about cruiser sports and got to try para hockey for the first time. Para hockey had existed in my area where I grew up, but it wasn't right in my immediate vicinity, so it was not necessarily accessible to me at the time. But it did exist. So when I moved here and was looking for a way to get out of the house and to meet people and to establish myself in a community, Cruisers was there for me. So there's been a few opportunities.
Yeah, I think for me, I can think of two situations where grassroots really helped breathe life into my love of parasports, and that was Wood Eden Camp, which is just in the London, Ontario area. and also Marywood Camp. And the reason I throw Marywood in there is when I started at Wood Eden, those were all focused on sports that were played on land. So sports like wheelchair basketball, sledge hockey, all of those things that you would normally see. And so, yeah, I got to understand it and understand that it existed, because before I went to camp, I didn't really know where to turn with parasports, and that even stems from before my respite worker, found bocce through the yellow pages and like looking through pamphlets and phone books and things like that. So for me, that camp was the first exposure. The second one, Marywood, was exposed in a whole different way, because I got to understand that water sports could be done by people with disabilities. You could go canoeing, you could go kayaking, you could go sailing, you could go just swimming in the lake, and you could do water activity. And so for me, Marywood really opened my eyes to a whole different world that I went, what? You mean I could pick a water activity every day and I'm good with that, and I can feel safe and feel, accounted for? So those kind of camps, which by the way, we need to get Kevin Collins on the program, and I'm literally speaking out loud as I'm saying this, because those programs are all run by funders and people who are donating money to Easter Seals, who are donating money to programs. Without donors of programs like that, none of those camps are available to people. And I remember talking to one Kevin Collins at your wedding, and I said, Kevin, the place that I really miss was Blue Mountain, and I am pretty sure I could say this safely. And he said, if I was on the if I was at the helm of Easter Seals at the time they sold off Blue Mountain, I wouldn't have sold it off, because that just added so much opportunity for people to rent events, to use the mountains, to use all those things. But everything comes down to the dollars and cents. And if you don't have the dollars and cents, you cannot make any of this work. And without Marywood and Wood Eden, none of this is possible for me.
If you're not exposed to it, you don't know it exists. We keep coming back to it.
And so that's why we had a whole, chunk of the program set aside to talk about funding and the importance of funding and money and what that does for organizations. And you really are letting out somebody be able to live out their dreams and realize that, I can do ABC activity, and you need to fund these, because whether it's the grassroots level or all the way up to the Paralympic Games, it's got to start somewhere, and it all relates to money deep down inside. So fund those organizations as you're able to, and donations are always accepted. And if you need to get in contact with On Para or anybody else, stay tuned for another about 30 seconds and you'll find out some more information. But please, on behalf of people in Ontario and other places, fund, because it is very, very necessary to make the parasports world tick the way it should.
Look around your arenas, look around your local community. There will be signs for it. They will exist. You will pass a sheet of ice and see a para hockey team play. You will pass a volleyball court and see a sitting volleyball team play. You will pass a soccer field and see amputee soccer or blind soccer. It all exists. If you don't know how to find it, Google is a wonderful machine.
It really, really is. And it really involves just typing in keywords of parasports in Ontario to make it all happen. So go out there.
Or wherever you are.
Yeah, wherever you are. If you're listening outside of Ontario, we greatly appreciate you as well. But it's really just a Google search away, and it's at your fingertips. And so just go and acknowledge the importance of parasports and the funding that exists. With that, that is the end of our program for this week. I would like to thank Josh Watson. I would also like to thank our fabulous technical producer, Mark Affollo. Until next week, be safe, be well.
The Neutral Zone is brought to you by the Ontario Para Network. Connect with them at ON Para Network. Follow them online at onpara.ca. Now that's a winning combination.